Okay, so now it's time to talk about the actual theory of natural selection that Darwin proposed in his book. Um, the book is really difficult read because it is so painstakingly thorough. It is certainly not a novel, but anybody who's serious about biology really needs to read the book. Even probably an audible version of the book might put you to sleep. Probably don't want to listen to it in the car. You might find yourself run off the road. But it's a pivotal theory for understanding biology. So let's get highlighters selected here. All right. The book can be summarized. I've seen different summaries over the years, but these are the five, some books will say six major points that you get when you read the book. First point, there's a struggle for existence that goes on between organisms in their native environments. And the main reason there's a struggle is not just because you're out in the weather, in the cold, in the rain, in the heat, whatever. But there are more living things produced than there are resources that can support them. As a result, there's competition. So organisms reproduce exponentially. That was Malthus's concept. And despite exponential reproduction, populations remain amazingly stable. Darwin observed that, like, a typical frog will lay thousands of eggs in the pond, but only a few frogs survive out of the thousands of eggs. And that's because of the struggle that's going on among frogs and the predators of frogs and everything else. Ultimately, resources are in short supply. And so this first concept, statement number one, we're all in a fight for our lives, and not everybody's going to come out of it alive. Number two, we all vary in our characteristics, whether it's hair color, eye color, skin color, body color. It might be body weight. It could be the circumference of turtle heads. It could be the scales on the margin of the jaw of a snake. We all vary in our characteristics, and that includes not only physical characteristics, but behavioral characteristics and other things, including things like running speed. Not only do we have variations in our characteristics, but we also inherit those variations. Now, this is the problem with Darwin's theory in 1859. Blending inheritance did not support how the differences between organisms of a species that are genetically determined and inherit from parents, how that would support evolutionary theory, because it was shown unequivocally and mathematically that if blending inheritance was correct, even the fittest organisms on the planet would be watering their genes down as they bred, because their kids would always be a blend of the two parents and not discrete characteristics from one or the other parent. The next one, the struggle that is set up back here in number one, the struggle is not random. The winners are more fit, and people or organisms that are more fit simply have more children than organisms that are less fit. So if you're fit, you get to grow up, you get to reproduce, you get to have babies that inherit your fitness. If you are unfit, you either die or you reproduce and make fewer babies. Very hard to document in the wild, but it has been done now in the last 20 to 30 years. Lastly, differential survival leads to gradual change, with favorable adaptations developing over unfavorable ones. The idea is that we have evolved with changes over time from ancestors that were different than we are now. So while winners reproduce winners, losers die or do not produce as many offspring. The population will slowly change to a winning form. A couple of points here. Individuals evolve according to Darwin's theory. Individuals do not evolve. Why did I say that? Individuals do not evolve according to Darwin's theory. Populations evolve. What that means is that an individual mouse cannot change. If it's born with the wrong color fur, it will die with the wrong color fur because it's unfit. The mice, the rats, the snakes, the eagles, the oak trees, the grasses that are born with the proper characteristics get to grow up, they survive, they reproduce offspring that have those characteristics. That means the population is evolving, not individuals. Next, natural selection cannot work on acquired traits, only inherited ones. In other words, if you've developed a trait because maybe you had a car accident and now your arm is bent in a funny way, so you can now reach into a funny piece of machinery and repair things that no one else can. Your kids cannot inherit that feature from you, and you cannot affect the evolution of the population with your oddly tool-like arm. So only inherited things can be a part of the story of evolution, not acquired traits. Next, adaptations that are favorable in one environment may actually be lethal on the same species in a different environment. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one that's lethal, but things like sickle cell anemia, if you live in Africa and you don't carry the sickle cell anemia gene, you are at a serious disadvantage and you may die from malaria. On the other hand, if you have the sickle gene and you live in Africa, you're not going to die of malaria. Here in the United States, people with the sickle gene are at a disadvantage. If they marry somebody with the sickle gene, they can have children that have the disease and die from it. But in Africa, there's an advantage. In the United States, it's a disadvantage. It all depends on your environment. So adaptations that are good in one place may be terrible in another. And lastly, evolutionary fitness is measured by the reproductive success of an organism, not just its survivorship. So survival of the fittest, the phrase survival of the fittest, is an incorrect summary of Darwin's theory. It's not survival of the fittest, it's reproduction of the fittest that is the story of Darwin's theory of evolution. Now, we have to go to the rabbit game to explain a bit of natural selection theory. So what we have here is a landscape. Let's see if I can get this in the window. It looks like you can see everything. We have a white rabbit on a brown landscape. And this is going to be the story of what happens to that white rabbit as time goes by on this brown landscape. So we have to add a friend, because without a friend, the rabbit can't reproduce. So we start the timeline, and we add a friend. Whoops. I've got to escape and get back into my Java applet. Okay, here we go. Add a friend. Okay, so here we go. Let's erase that. Okay, good. Now I'm going to come back here. Good. Now, we've got two rabbits, and we need to let them, okay, here they go. The rabbits are hopping around, and, you know, rabbits will do what rabbits do. They will reproduce, and they will make lots of little rabbits, and now we have more rabbits hopping around. And note that they're on a brown landscape, and they're not really suited to survive on a brown landscape. If we add wolves, the wolves are going to have a field day with the white rabbits. The white rabbits really can't hide, and there are no mutations right now for something that's camouflaged. So we click the little button to add a mutation, and now when the white rabbits reproduce, they'll probably have some brown babies. Remember now, Darwin said there's variation in every feature in a population, and look at that, we have a brown baby. The wolves don't see the brown baby, and thankfully there's still a white rabbit. The brown one and the white one can breed, and they'll have, oh, look at all those little brown baby rabbits running around. The wolves can't see the brown rabbits very well, so now the brown rabbits are camouflaged. They are more fit than the white rabbits were. Down here you can see the gene frequencies changing in the rabbit population. Brown is becoming more common, and the white is very much less common. White is in red, brown fur is in blue, and you can see the brown fur is, that light blue line there is much higher. The total frequency is what the dark line is. So now the brown rabbits are out of control, but you know what? It snowed. And golly gee Moses, snow changes the landscape. By the way, you might think this never happens, but welcome to the life of the snowshoe hare. Brown in the summer, white in the winter, because of the changing environment. Climate change might be a problem for the snowshoe hare. At any rate, we have lots of brown rabbits now hopping around in a white landscape, and the wolves are picking them off easily because they're not camouflaged. Now the brown rabbits are getting eaten, and the white rabbits are camouflaged. Please notice, individual rabbits do not evolve. You either have the correct fur and you get to have rabbit babies, or you have the wrong fur and you don't get to have any babies. What this simulation is trying to show you is a couple of things. Number one, there's variation in the features of the rabbit population. Secondly, individual rabbits don't evolve. The individual rabbits are simply carriers of genes, and they're trying to survive in the environment, and they're struggling. It gets really crowded. There's a struggle for existence. What you're seeing here now is that if you're fit with the right fur, you get to have babies that will inherit that fur. You'll notice that now the landscape is brown. The rabbit population slowly will start to change to brown, not because the rabbits are becoming brown themselves. It's because brown rabbits are surviving and having brown babies that are surviving and having brown babies, etc., etc. So I hope you've got the point with this simulation. I'm going to pause it for a second. You can see now in the brown landscape that the brown fur gene is, when we changed it, the white fur gene was above, but as time goes on, the gene frequencies are fluctuating back and forth in the rabbit population as they're struggling to survive on a changing landscape with predators running around trying to eat them. So that finishes now the discussion of natural selection. It's time to move on with population genetics.